Welcome to Monarchist Minute, Royalist news and discussion out of the good old US of A. Craig was a little delayed. I am Charles York. Joining me tonight is Bubba. I'm sorry, I keep saying Bubba because of firearms memes. Sorry. Trad of the Raider variety, Raiders of the Lost Trad. Uh, I'm sure you've never heard that one before. William Stout, uh, Victor Smith, and myself, and I realized that Vic should have actually been doing the intro since he proposed the topic, so sorry.
Well, that is quite all right. Today, as you know, we record on Fridays and release on Mondays. So if we were going to talk about this next week, the day before the coronation, you wouldn't be hearing it until after the coronation. So tonight is our coronation pregame show.
Da 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 da.
Yeah.
No.
So let's talk a little bit about the coronation. And Matt Baker, Useful Charts, released a YouTube video earlier today, actually, perfect timing, where he talked about the ceremonies of the coronation, ceremonies we will get into later on tonight. But first, we would like to make a very mention of King Charles III. Well, there are some things that King Charles III is actually changing about his coronation from his mother's coronation, and there are some things about his coronation that have not been seen in 90 years. Namely, you get not one, but two different coronations and vivats. And now I suppose I should hand the mic off to the people who want to talk more about the ceremonies. I believe it was Trad who had a comment to make, so I will pass it off to him.
Thank you. Yeah, so on the topic of the ceremonies, yes, this will be the first one we've seen since the last king, actually. And I don't even remember if he was wed, but where we're
Edward
having,
VIII was not.
yeah, where we had a king being crowned and we had a queen consort being crowned at the same time. And so it is truly a pretty fun moment in history to see this because I think, if I'm not incorrect, the last coronation of a monarch that still rules today would be that of Felipe of Spain. And he actually did have a queen consort at the same time, but they don't act, well, they're not a queen, they're a princess. Or no, it is queen, it's Queen Letizia. Either way, not important. It is going to be a pretty interesting moment in history to see this in England and in the UK. It's also going to be interesting because the king is changing, like you said, a lot of things, including, unlike his mother's coronation, none of the peers who are going to be at the coronation will be wearing their coronets, which are basically, for those who don't know, smaller crowns to indicate nobility.
Actually, King Charles III has requested that the coronets not be worn by
That's
the
what I said.
by the lesser nobles.
That's what I
Ah,
said, that they not be worn, yes.
right, of course. And more broadcast information. You will have to get up at 5 a.m. to watch the coronation, 5 a.m. Eastern Time on ABC, CNN, Fox News, which I believe will also be on Big Fox, and NBC. Once again, 5 a.m. early call on Saturday, May 6th.
Yes, it is going to be quite a early rise, but he has requested that the coronets not be worn, which is an interesting choice coming from an English monarch who have been assuming up to this point would be a bit more traditional than less. He's also requested that they not even wear any of the traditional, ceremonial garments, which will get us into our second discussion later. But he's also restricting the number of peers, and he's going to have more representatives from charities and other nations appearing, including that of kings, queens, and dukes around, and princes around Europe. So it's going to, it's going to be energetic and it's going to be exciting. But that being said, unless anyone else has anything else, I think I'll hand it to Charles so we can move on to our first discussion topic of the night. Charles?
Oh,
Actually, I do have something to discuss.
Let's hear.
President Biden will be represented by the First Lady, Jill Biden. He will not be in attendance for the coronation.
well,
I just wanted to make that aside before we hand it back off to Charles.
uh, who just sneezed? So anyways, always have a push to mute button. It does great things. Like hiding your sneeze, then you say that you sneeze, so you defeated the whole whatever. Anyways,
Use
no,
your words, Charles.
that's difficult. No, we have this is set to be probably the biggest moment of many people's lives. But the thing I wanted to note is that this ceremony fundamentally, minus the oath to uphold the Protestant religion, big cringe, is essentially the same Catholic coronation rite that they've been using for a while. And if you don't believe me, look up the entry on coronation in the Old Catholic Encyclopedia, which several people like Catholic Answers have uploaded completely online because I guess it's in the public domain now. Um, so that is an interesting thing from a historical standpoint. But the discussion topic, I suppose, because admittedly I don't know much about the specific plans for the coronation itself, um, is how much emphasis we should be placing on tradition and rituals, because there's a common accusation thrown around that if you like to focus on, the crowns and the symbolism behind the crowns and the symbolism behind certain decrees and the symbolism behind X, Y, and Z, then you're just LARPing. And the natural reaction to that would be to just dismiss everything in its entirety and just completely focus on the practical aspects of it. And I guess to define more what I'm saying, I'll lead off on it. I think that our biggest problem with some people's biggest problem is we focus on the symbols and the rituals just for the sake of focusing on the symbols and rituals, when those symbols and rituals actually mean something. A symbol is symbolic. Um, and that is why that's what we should be talking about. So when the king gives his assent, he'll say in Nor or the old French dialect. I can't remember which one. That's Norman. I think it's Norman French. The king allows it or something. And then if he is saying, "Nah, we ain't doing this," he'll say, "The king shall consider it." And the wrong thing to do would just be to get hung up on the fact that, ooh, we're saying something in some obscure language that no one uses anymore. Cool. But the important thing is to notice the actual words themselves. The king will consider it as a polite way of saying no. um, that's the sort of what. And then when it comes to the crowns and stuff, well, what does the scepter mean? Well, it means his authority. Well,
Yeah, and he gets two scepters.
ooh, for
What? Yeah, what are the two different ones for?
The first scepter is to represent his authority over his people, and the second one is authority over the Church of England.
oh, so and it's the same Church of England that told Edward the Seventh that
Eighth.
Oh, sorry, Edward the Eighth. Sorry, I
Wait, no,
like Edward the
Henry. What am
Seventh.
I? What am I talking about? It's Henry VIII that I'm thinking about.
No, no,
Unless we're
no, no, no.
talking
I
about
was no, no,
different
no.
monarchs way
I was
later.
thinking of Edward the Eighth and how everyone was like, "Oh, you can't marry an American divorcee." It's like, I mean, the whole point of the church is the Church of England is to get around marriage law. Um, but no, I will say this. Digression. I like Edward the Seventh. He potentially converted to Catholicism on his deathbed, but cool dude in general. I have a box of his cigars. Well, the box for his cigars. I don't have the cigars. The cigars are long
He
spent.
smoked them all.
No, really. I mean, this box is like at least maybe 100 years old. Um, but so any King Edward specials, look him up or something. But the the thing is that the scepter. People get the LARPy thing, and this I would say this is LARPing. We'll be getting caught up in the nitty gritty design element of it for the American monarch. What should the scepter exactly look like? Whereas the practical thing is, what do we want the scepter to convey? Do we want it to convey that this is a monarch who has power, right? He's ruling as well as reigning, right? Because if the American monarch is going to just be a figurehead with no practical power, or he's going to be subject to the Congress or some stupid document, then really there's no point in him having a scepter because he doesn't wield power,
The
right?
scepter commands no authority.
The scepter commands no authority. It's just there for set dressing, right? And this is the thing. Everyone's like, "Oh, this is all just pointless rigmarole." Well, it's not pointless rigmarole. It shows something, right? I mean, it's like vestments, and I mean, it's in a religious context. To bring it to religion, just for a moment, Leon. Um, the every. I mean, yes, strictly speaking, a lot of what happens. I mean, like the priest's vestments are not strictly speaking necessary. A priest could hypothetically say mass in plain clothes, which unfortunately has to happen. Sometimes when the church is under persecution, but they're there to remind you of something that this is a priestly function. So obviously he needs the priest vestments set him apart, and I'm sure someone else can better explain the specific symbolism for each part of the vestment for each object. But the thing is that it conveys something. It's not pointless. It's not just there for show because it's conveying something deeper. Okay, having a Porsche with a stripe on it versus having a Porsche without a stripe on it doesn't actually convey anything. I'm not a car guy, so I don't know if that's something people do. This actually shows something, and therefore it is completely worth maintaining and looking at, even though it costs money. Oh no, this ceremony that will look
Hmm.
great and
Well,
it will cost like a fraction of a percent of the national GDP compared to all the pointless spending Parliament does. Oh no, it will cost
so
money.
so to stop yelling at Parliament for a moment, and the Republicans, I would actually. So on the reason for all of the ceremonies and all of the pieces that you wear and use at the coronation, they actually, like he said, mean something. And I think what what people are getting at when they say that it's useless to have some of these symbols, they're right in a sense. If you view the king as nothing more than a figurehead, then having these symbols, the scepter, the crown, the throne, the Latin or the old Norman, right? Like all of these, if it's all just for a figurehead, then you're right, it has no meaning and it's useless. But if you think of it in the sense, right, that the bishop putting the crown on the head of the king, or in general, or of any monarch, right, and having Latin be spoken and having scepters be used, like it all actually is supposed to show something relating to the monarchy and to represent it. So the scepter is to show the power with which the king wields. But if you have a king that wields no power, he should not wield a scepter. The crown represents that he is the head of the state. He is the state. He is in charge of all. But if he isn't, then there's no point to the crown. If he wears robes, but all the robes do is flaunt wealth and don't display the greatness of the nation through the monarch, then they're useless. So the point must be made, if you're going to have this ceremony or regalia, it must inherently go with a heightened power of the monarch. The monarch is the state. That's why he dressed. People always ask, how can a Catholic monarch truly be pious if he's rich? Well, he's not rich. The state is rich. He is the state. He represents that to everyone. And so it must be understood that to have these is to inherently have a strong king, and to have a strong king is to have these. The traditions remind us of the old and to not stray from it, right? They remind us of the kings of Saxon England and the kings of French England, right? They remind us of the lions and
The kings of Scotland, because
kings of
the
Scotland.
throne of
Yeah.
Scone is in St. Edward's chair.
Yes, the
And
so for
IRA, please don't hurt me. It also reminds them of the kings of Ireland.
and well, specifically, like, so one thing people always question is, and I know a bit about this, heraldry, right? The coat of arms of the King of England, right? People always wonder, why is it on everything? What's the point of it? Well, the lions of England remind us of King Richard the Lionheart, remind us of his struggle and the Plantagenet struggle in the Crusades, and they remind us of the power that they wielded. Um, the Lion of Scotland reminds us of the kings of Scotland and their, the Highland clans and the Lowland Scots speakers. Like, it reminds us of all of the things that he represents through them. So inherently, you must keep the tradition to keep the power that tradition reminds us of, and to keep that power, you got to keep the tradition. It's a two-way street, and it's truly important for maintaining a strong monarchy. Monarchies that lose their symbols, that lose the understanding of the tradition, don't last.
And I
I was going
think, sorry, go ahead, Bubba.
I was going to say something along the lines of what Trad just said. If you get
Oh,
rid
okay.
of some of the other traditions, like say you don't have the scepters, or I know some monarchs have the orb. I don't. If you get rid
Yes,
of that, what's next?
yes. King Charles III will be presented with an orb.
What's next? When you get rid of the crown, okay, what's after that? The king, like it's
I
a,
mean,
and for lack of a better word, it's a slippery slope. But also with tradition, after our president FDR, we went to a two-term limit. But that was a tradition started by George Washington in 1783. So traditions do matter to the country and to the nation at large. So if you get rid of the traditions, what's left of the nation?
Well, yeah, I'm going to sort of piggyback off of the point here and just remind everyone that this and we've only scratched the surface of some of the traditions that will be kind of altered by King Charles III with his coronation. Queen Elizabeth II's coronation clocked in at about 3 hours. Estimated runtime for this is going to be about 1. The procession is going to have a lot less people in it. The coronation is going to have a lot less people involved in it. It's going.
and
Go ahead.
if I may, I know we're talking about a lot of bad things and a lot of downsides that, some traditions are being changed, some traditions are being rolled back, some traditions are being cut. But at the same time, I also want to point out that under no circumstances was the UK, the Parliament, obligated to give Charles his coronation, and Britain will be the only nation, the only current European monarchy to even bother coronating properly their monarch. And
And a wise man once told me that if the monarch doesn't have real power. He must make up for it in ceremony.
I mean, this is the thing, though. I mean, the concession that Parliament didn't have. I'm sorry, the that wasn't even a voice crack. That was just something going in my throat. Uh, the Parliament didn't have to give the king a coronation. Well, this is the problem. The king is Parliament's boss. You know, I mean,
I mean, I know. I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying it could be worse.
I know it could be worse, but I mean, this really is. If Parliament did say um did say no to the coronation, I really wish Charles III would just send this clip via email to Parliament, as if Parliament was a organization with one
Where's the
email address.
clip?
You're just forgetting one tiny itsy bitsy little detail. I own you. I mean, it's. Uh, I mean, everything is. Remember, it's His Majesty's warship. His Majesty's ship. It's the Royal Air Force. He should be able to send the Royal Air Force and nuke it Parliament from orbit. I don't want him to. I don't want these people to die. But technically, he has
I'm
that right.
pretty sure that would take out Buckingham with it, so it's probably a good thing he doesn't.
I know, but it's a small price to pay to be rid of Parliament. But, which, don't get me wrong, okay, I don't want to kill any of the people. I don't even want the building, because admittedly, Parliament's set up in a pretty nice building. But at the same time, if I could nuke the idea of Parliament from orbit, this has been your weekly absolutist slash feudalist
I love
tangent.
absolutism.
Who doesn't? Well, the French, obviously, but their opinions have been irrelevant since 1789. Um, but before that, they were pretty cool.
Right. So, and just the most visible thing are the lesser nobles with their coronets on. That symbolizes something. It symbolizes that they are set apart from the rest of us. And he's requesting that they not wear coronets and they don't wear their robes. Which, to be fair, it is his right to make that request. It is his right to make that request, but it's kind of missing, in my opinion, it's sort of missing the forest from the trees. I hope someone here can better articulate my point than that.
Well, if you could get into it a bit more, I could probably pick up on what you're saying and then go into it.
Okay, so like the symbolism, we are losing some of the symbolism of the coronation. Of course, everything that traditionally gets handed to the king will get handed to him. But some of the, like, it's not going to be this grand, big, elaborate procession. Well, it's going to be grand, big, and elaborate, but it's not going to be as grand, big, and elaborate as it could be. There's going to be a lot less royals in the procession working at the coronation, some of which for good reason. There's going to be there's like I mentioned earlier, the coronets are gone. Like there's just a lot of other sort of symbolism that makes Britain the constitutional monarchy that it is. It's just, if you don't have some of that symbolism, what do you have? And I'm so glad they kept the gold chariot that they're going to be using for the procession back to Buckingham Palace. I'm glad they kept that.
One thing that I think that I think is also an important point, and this might be what you're trying to get at, but like when you just you just water down the ceremonies and you don't understand their purpose, you start to forget why they're needed. And so when you water it down enough, right, like say something important like the actual placing of the crown on the head of the King of England in the UK, right? If you take that away, right, that's just a useless tradition. Or you take this away, that's just a useless tradition. Eventually, you get to the point, and that's where we are today, where people are suggesting that monarchy is just an old tradition. And it is an old tradition, but it's a useful one. It is a well thought out one that has worked for centuries. And so it's important to remember that monarchy doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's always going to be associated with old tradition. And so it must be remembered that we keep the old traditions, we keep the greatest old tradition of monarchy. So there's really no reason to get rid of some of the bulwarks of the ceremony.
Yes. Well, they're not getting rid of placing the crown on a king's head. They're getting rid of the coronets on the lesser
Yeah,
noble heads. Yeah.
of course, I know, but I'm saying that it it will go. I'm saying that if you say now, right, the coronets aren't needed, then eventually it can become, and this may sound like slippery slope, but it's real. Then eventually the crown, the scepters aren't needed and the crown isn't needed and the king isn't needed eventually is what they'll come to. And they
I
have come to it in points. And so it's important to remember why we have it.
okay. This is something that did jump in my head, because someone said it. The concept of modern monarchy, where we can move past the traditions and whatnot, and just do that. I fundamentally reject modern monarchy as a premise. The idea that that we can have a monarchy that is completely devoid of traditions, and we effectively just put a guy with that's hereditary, completely strip it of everything that has come before, and have just a hereditary ruler with a little bit of power, but he's subject to a constitution. Because yes, it's a monarchy in the most technical dictionary definition sense of the word, but it's not monarchy. I mean,
Are you,
it's there are different expressions of what monarchy is, and this gets into the whole thing with, there's no such thing as a perfect translation. But the concept of monarchy in the West, in Europe, in Christendom, is that fundamental monarchy that we've had ever since what was it? Shoot, Armenia became Catholic. This union of this subjection of royal power to the church. Fundamentally, that is, in the eyes of, in the definition of the West, what monarchy is. Okay, we can, it's not just the hereditary thing, it's the social structure that goes with it. The idea that a king is the chief servant of his people, that he is there to serve service people, and help, and for their temporal needs, to help them get to heaven, you know um because obviously if you don't have to worry about food, you can spend more time worrying about your soul. um this is this is what monarchy is. The concept of modern monarchy, completely devoid of that, isn't the same thing. I mean, dictionary definition it is, but everything that goes with it, it's not. It's just a completely new thing, as Christian monarchy was a new thing. It's like how we call the Persian Empire the Persian Empire. Well, back in the day, they weren't calling it the Persian Empire. The thing that Alexander the Great beat up, because empire is a Latin term that derives from, it's it's that's sort of taking a more modern, as you know modern as the concept of empire is, and applying it to something that came before. What we're doing is we're taking a term when we say modern monarchy and stripping it of all of its existing connotations. And that is why fundamentally I reject the premise. it's something else. We shouldn't be calling it monarchy. We should come up
One
with something
o-
else.
on that, there has been a big debate within certain monarchist circles, and I know here as well, not on the podcast, but in this Discord, which, by the way, if you want to see these live, join on Discord. Um, but one of the big discussions is North Korea a monarchy? And I continually argue no. Because, like you said, it is the idea of a modern monarchy where it's still a hereditary, autocracy, but it's not a monarchy. There's no tradition. There's no coronation. There's no ceremonies. There's no traditions there. And I mean, to be fair, there aren't monarchical traditions in Korea for since maybe the late 1800s. But like the modern system in North Korea is not a monarchy; it's a dictatorship, a hereditary one, but still a dictatorship. So
Well,
if you remove monarchy from the context of tradition, then it just becomes dictatorship, autocracy.
we forget there was a time that a country did try a quote unquote modern monarchy, where it was led by one person, it was hereditary, but they didn't take the title as king because they didn't. And that was back in the 1600s under the Lord Protector Cromwell,
Oh, don't
which
even get
means
Charles
Charles.
started.
I'm just saying it
Don't
has
get me started.
Cromwell
it
was
has
not
been
a
tried.
monarchy. It was a
And
theocratic
That's
republic.
what that
that's what
is
I'm
what
saying. That's
that is what Bubba's saying. He's saying that when you try monarchy minus the tradition, it doesn't work.
Yeah,
it
and I
lasted
mean,
all but one person. Now let's not get into that debate because I think we all agree on that.
But the point is, monarchy is not single person rule. That may be the direct definition, but that's not what it is. Monarchy is the tradition associated with the rule.
and I mean, and this is the thing. It's not this notion of monarchy in Christendom. Just it's not necessarily attached to a specific amount of royal power. I would say. I think that because the rights because it's not because this is the thing. This whole concept of positive written human law isn't it wasn't as common back in the day because everything because we didn't need a specific law saying murdering people is bad because we had the because we had the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill. I think that's number 4, right, the
I think
first of
it's number 6 or 7.
oh,
The thou
hold
shalt
on,
not
hold on.
kill.
So I Well, I have them, but okay. So no, I mean it's, I mean that's, I mean, but the traditional powers associated with the monarch, may vary from place to place. It's all about rights and privileges. The ancient and these rights and privileges exist, and this is something hard for us to understand because everything is the result of positive law these days. But these rights and privileges exist because they do. I mean they're just old. They're so old that they exist. Um I mean it's like why does the city of London have all of these things? Well, even in the Magna Carta they're like it just does, we guess. I mean the city of London has existed as an institution really before uh the Kingdom of England. Um I mean it's I mean, that sort of sense, and that's another thing that distinguishes actual monarchy, I would say, in the Christendom context, the default connotation of monarchy, I'll say, from the modern monarchy, because in traditional monarchy, there are things that don't have to be said, and this is something that I think that we're going to have to struggle with as American monarchists if we ever do get into power, because it's going to be hard to organically establish those structures because how the traditional Christian monarchies came about was as a result of the fall of the collapse of the Roman Empire and and all of that. What we're doing is is essentially trying to it's what we're doing is not going to be the result of the collapse of the American Republic, because there's nothing in the American Republic to create a monarchy out of. And also, by the way, we're not we're not trying to overthrow the government, and we're kind of hoping that the whole system doesn't collapse, because that tends to, have food, famine, violence, and all this other nonsense. Well, not nonsense, but not pleasant stuff. But that is, I mean, that's that. It's a question that potentially makes for another interesting discussion in the podcast, because um there is no American monarch. There's no really. There's very little that can be salvaged from the current American system for good monarchical traditions that found this. I There are some people here who want to say we want to establish an American monarchy, and I am saying, and this is kind of my line in the sand, any monarchy that is fundamentally only based on American traditions most likely will not be a monarchy in the proper sense. And I mean this in the default Christian sense. And people say, well, what about monarchies from other countries? Well, that's the thing. The English association of the word monarchy is grounded in the Christian understanding of the word monarchy, because English is a product of a Christian people, right? If we were speaking Hindi, then then whatever word they have for monarchy would carry a slightly different interpretation. If we translate it to English, it would translate as monarchy, but the connotation is different. The unhidden, I mean, this is the thing with translation, and why you could potentially, why sometimes you had to translate one word as entire different, as a phrase, as opposed to you know there very often there isn't really such a thing as a perfect direct translation. And so the Christian, so when I say monarchy, unless I'm qualifying, I mean Christendom. I mean the monarchy that came out of Christendom. And that is and I think that that is the best system that we have ever had, and we ever will have, because because it took as its inspiration when Christ washed the disciples' feet at the last supper, and it took that as its inspiration for how each monarch should live. So I'm not saying I don't recognize any of the monarchies that happened before. I'm just saying that the our understanding of monarchy is so fundamentally different that we're using the same word, but the connotation we mean is different. That's that's what I'm saying. Okay, I mean, I acknowledge, all those monarchies were monarchies in a real sense, but the connotation that I'm referring to, the default connotation of monarchy as we understand it in America and Germany and in France and in Spain, that they're not the same. And I can't really just say, let's come up with a different word, because we're just so, because it's a similar institution. It's a different, I wouldn't even say it's a similar institution. I'm saying it's I guess a different expression of the institution, if that makes sense. Or that I mean, I don't know how to describe it. I'm struggling to find the word to use, because it's how, I mean, you guys get what I'm saying, right? Is that there's monarchy as in when king die, king's son take over, you know, and then there's the dictionary definition, but then there's everything that goes with it. And I'm saying that the Christian monarchy is fundamentally distinct from all other forms of monarchy that exist either before it or that exist concurrently with it, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And where is it? Oh, here we go. The Ten Commandments. There we go. Okay. 4 is honor thy father and thy mother, that thou mayest be long lived upon the land which the Lord thy God will give to thee. Thou shalt not kill is number 5. There we go. And then
Right. Though I don't think the number commandment of thou shalt not kill was relevant to the actual point that you were trying to
I
make.
know, but I had already gotten my missile out to look for it, and then I came across a placed
Right.
a
So,
break.
right.
So
So,
just so we set the record straight, even though you had ample time to look it up yourself. So
right. So,
remember you are supposed to know in substance the 10 commandments, the 6 precepts, and
yes, yes,
and
yes, yes,
anyways.
yes, yes. So, let's get getting to, and you made a, I think you made a point about sort of traditions. So, if you could just restate, what is the difference between an American monarchy and an American monarchy?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Okay. An American monarchy to me would be a fundamental break with the concept of monarchy that we've had um, for a while. I mean, the Christian monarchy, that Christian monarchy we talk about, that Christian monarchy of Christian service for religious purposes, not out of adherence to any document, but because it is what Christ did. That the King of the universe came not to be served, but to serve, and therefore we who are lesser than him, because the disciple is not greater than his master, should also serve. An American monarchy, America, would be would be would be a break with that. It'd be a new understanding of monarchy because we're basing it off artificial traditions born of the Enlightenment and whatnot. And there's going to be some Christian stuff in there because the founding fathers did it was unavoidable. They were going to have some Christian principles. Um, that is um yeah, that's that. So but an American monarchy would be a monarchy that is based on that fundamental notion of Christian service. The king would would see his job to potentially lay down his life for his people and to do everything that he has to serve his people, because by divine providence and maybe even God's direct active will, those people that he is ruling over were given to him to rule for their benefit, and also if he governs them well, it will avail him to salvation because he's doing God's will by taking care of them and fulfilling God's will. Just as whenever we do God's will, that's beneficial. um so that is why I support an American monarchy and not an American monarchy, because that fundamentally is the ideological difference. And that is where I draw a line. That is where, because I used to be in this camp where basically all I wanted was to replace the president with a hereditary figure, and I thought that would solve the problem. And everything else would be the same, practically, minus a few details. Um, that that's not it. That doesn't solve the fundamental problem, because it's not just guy in charge passes it on to his son. That's that is a great thing for stability. That is a great thing um for knowing where it is. But this is um yes, let him on. This is where I am going to um this is where I am going to say that monarchy, that the kind of monarchy I advocate for actually has its roots, or has its solution for our problems, not solution, but alleviates our problems because it is going to be that Christian service modeled after our perfect master. And now I'm going to continue to type, and I'm going to actually type because Bubba asked me a question. So, okay. Koshin, hi. I assume you totally agree with what I said and want to say, good job, Charles. You changed my mind, and everything that I said said
Oh,
made total sense.
definitely. No,
Okay.
I am here as the obligatory counterpoint figure again, I suppose. So I suppose I would have to say, sort of the complete opposite view in a lot of regards. I think the image you're painting of monarchy is very I'm not sure what the best term
Idealistic?
would be. No, very focused on a particular point in time and not actually reflective of the broader scope of what it has been throughout history. And even if you only focused on the AD era, I think you're really simplifying what it's been. I beyond that, to get into more specifics, I think well, basically, the idea that what we have are artificial traditions. Like, dude, the country's been around for like 200 years. Even if you want to argue that they were artificial to start, like, they are traditions now. Just, no qualifier for it. And
Well,
sorry.
to address you, I mean, like I was saying earlier, if you decry tradition within a monarchical system, then you eventually have to come to the conclusion by that logic that monarchy is an outdated tradition. So
Well, no, that
you can't really have a system that is by definition traditional without the tradition.
no, but that's my point. Is you're suggesting we essentially take what is traditional in the country and get rid of it for things that are not traditional in this country.
Well, what he's
but
suggesting is
I
that the
would
tradition
say,
within this country is anti-monarchist.
and just
I
bad in
don't.
general.
Well, okay. A, I don't 100% agree with that. B, you can make that argument, but you can't then say you're arguing from a position of traditionalism.
I am
You can't.
arguing from a certain tradition, not an
You argue, yes,
American
but it's
tradition.
okay. But if we're talking about, yeah, but we're talking about America, and you're saying I'm a traditionalist, but if you're talking about traditions that are foreign to the country, then you are not actually a traditionalist as far as this country is concerned, and this country is the subject.
Well, I'd
So
argue
it's
that monarchy is not within the sphere of American traditionalism. I'd argue that the traditionalism we talk about is a tradition that goes before America, and that we should, instead of starting a new modern path, it's kind of like if you imagine for me a tree, and it branches off in one direction, right? And then you say, I want to return to tradition like they still have in Europe. And then you say, well, that's not the tradition of this branch. Well, we don't want to be on this branch because this branch is inherently anti-monarchy and inherently, anti-tradition in the
right,
standard form. So my point being
but
that true traditionalism in the American sense would be wanting to convert the system to more of a European style, at least if you
okay,
believe in a European style.
but that's my point. Is that's the issue of contention here? Is the initial step of we should go back to European tradition? No, this is America. It's not Europe. A, this is America. It's not Europe. B, the tradition you're talking about, I'll admit, I'm not quite as read up on history as I could be. But it sounds very much like you are focusing on continental Europe rather than British tradition, because the idea you're talking a lot about you basically seem to suggest that limitations on the powers of the monarch is an inherently modernist concept.
It
which
is.
No, it's been tradition like that's why the barons forced King John to sign the Magna Carta, because it was always tradition in England that the king could not do what King John was trying to do,
No, but
and what the Magna Carta said he couldn't do.
but that's the thing though. The monarch was never absolute in his thing. The Magna Carta, okay, was phrased as a and I did say this. The exact powers of the monarch varied from place to place, but there was the idea of full on absolutism as we understand it is a product more of the as we understand it today, where the king
Yes, I
oversees
know.
literally everything, is a product of Louis the 16th, but or not 16th, sorry, 14th. But the thing is that the monarch couldn't fully oversee everything, but he always did. But he always did, and even in England, as far as I'm aware, he always had the authority. It's just that the power was diffused. Okay, and it was diffused through practicality, because obviously the king can't personally arrest some guy in Cheshire,
Yes, but that's
because
the point. That's the issue. Is if it's only due to practicality,
no, it's
then
not only.
when
That's the thing. I was
you
going to say
just said,
practicality and the
okay,
ancient rites and traditions that evolved over time,
right,
and
right. But
those
so
were
then the issue I'm sorry to interrupt, but then the issue becomes with what happened with King John is what do you do when the monarch decides, I don't care, I'm the king, do what I say. I know it's not tradition that's how it works, but I don't care. I'm in charge of the army. You're going to do what I say.
That
wait for him
just
At
to
that
die, I
point,
suppose.
no. Like
I
that
mean,
kings that do that don't last long. I mean, there's a tradition of kings getting killed for trying things like that, and even
yes,
if like one of the classic arguments for monarchy as a whole is the argument that a king, since he is the state, wouldn't do something in contrary to the needs of the state, because that would be in contrary to his needs. He is the state, so it wouldn't make sense for him to do something that would harm the state.
okay, well, A, I don't agree that the king is just inherently the state. B, um, I mean, this is essentially just that essentially also relies on the assumption that the king will always act rationally, which is not an assumption you can make about literally any normal mortal human being. Um, there is literally only one person who is capable of always acting perfectly, and we all know who that is.
or two.
Fair, you know what? You're right. My bad. But you get my point. You can't just assume that he's always going to act rationally and correctly. And the other, to address the earlier point, maybe some of us would just prefer a system that has points before we just get to, oh well, I guess we'll just start killing the guy in charge because he's not nice.
But the question
And
but the
again,
question
this
is, does that happen often enough where the guy is gone off his rocker? Because remember, if it wasn't the exception, then and not the rule, then we would have had people trying to write down formal written constitutions way before the people started to do that. But I mean, so that's the thing. Is the guy, the off chance that any individual monarch is going to go off his rocker in some way? Does that outweigh? Does having a system to prevent that limits a monarch from doing something bad? Does that outweigh preventing a monarch from doing something good and necessary?
um I would generally argue yes. But even beyond that, sorry, I gotta gonna have to wrap this up and head back out.
Oh yeah.
I didn't think this would take this long, but even beyond that, I just kind of want to point out real fast. This still goes back to the point of, as I pointed out, this kind of thing is traditional. We've the Magna Carta was signed in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, and the Magna. I mean, I think that the
more
Magna
than
Carta.
that. Sorry,
I'm sorry.
because I gotta speak in broad strokes here because I gotta head out.
Okay.
But the idea that the king is meant to serve his people aligns with the idea that the tradition that we should be focusing on the traditions that we actually have, because that would be serving the people here in this country. And I gotta head out now. But thanks for letting me come in and be the counterpoint here.
Okay. Well, to
Thank you
kick
very
Emily
much.
down and out of earshot, well, I mean, no, I won't do that. This was a fun discussion. Does anyone have anything productive? Because I've been kind of monopolizing.
Not on that point. Though
Let's.
I think it is about time we moved on to our other discussion point because we've been here
Our other
almost an
discussion
hour.
point is wrapping up because three of us have some totally delightful and necessary meeting to get to.
Ah, yes, fair enough.
What? So we're
Then
not doing the. If we could talk with any king, I really was looking forward to that.
Yeah, we're gonna
we can
have
do
to
that
hold
next
off
week.
till next week, unfortunately. But
Unfortunately.
you'll get first crack since she proposed it. But
Sweet.
make
Alright.
sure it's crack is in
And
Since
he's
yo
gonna
go.
be
since he got
next week.
pushed to next week, he'll also get it first. But that being said, I think we should close up then. Charles, or is it
All
Victor
right.
who closes?
Oh
I
well,
think
it's
it's
no,
Charles.
You
it's
know
me.
what? Since I was supposed to do the intro but couldn't, may I do the outro?
As long as you do our in the description below shtick, sure.
Oh, eh, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to tonight's episode of Monarchist Minute. If you'd like to listen to us live, that is at Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern at our Discord server, link in the description below. If you would like to follow us on any of our social media platforms, you can find links to them in the description below. And now we will send it off to our chaplain, who has a very special prayer that I picked out for this week.
Please prepare yourself to pray in the manner you are accustomed, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. O God, to whom every human power is subject, grant to your servant Charles III success in the exercise of his high office, so that, always revering you and striving to please you, he may constantly secure and preserve for people entrusted to his care the freedom that comes from civil peace. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. So until next week, may God bless you and may God bless the United States of America.